Hi, this is Andy Schmuckler. I have some feeling about what I'm about to say is obvious, but I've also seen some signs that it's not obvious to everyone. Uh, MSNBC's ratings are way down. I think they fell immediately after the election, which is a quite clear clue. And there are shakeups happening on MSNBC, and I've observed Rachel Maddow's back first 100 days. Joy Reid is out. Got new management. I don't. Yeah, they got a problem. Lack of viewership. But it's not because MSNBC is in some way failing to do its job. It's not that there's a need. I mean, one can talk about, well, how do you improve it or not improve it? I think they've, you know, I work in the same business in a sense. I don't produce the perfect thing either. So, I think what they do is quite excellent, actually. I learn, even though I read the New York Times and this and that. I learn a lot from the insights of the people they bring in, and for the very intelligent people who, for the most part, man their anchors. There's an easy way of explaining the ratings problem of MSNBC. It's a financial hit, but it's really an obvious political, emotional, human reality in the country that manifests in a dropping just ratings, the same way that the blast from the Arctic leads to the drop in the temperature, whether Fahrenheit or centigrade. The loss of the election created a completely different world than the world we had been in, and than the world we would have been in had the election gone the other way. A lot of people approached the election with a lot of hope. I felt a lot of hope. And it was kind of hard for a lot of people to imagine that anything as ugly as Donald Trump had been and was daily being could get enough Americans to vote for him, to make him president. And then suddenly, the various questions that one had about this poll, that poll, who's going to vote, who's not going to vote, this swing state, that swing state, all gets answered. And all of a sudden, Americans, almost half of Americans, and certainly a huge number of that half that were passionately concerned that Kamala Harris be our next president, taking over from Joe Biden, and the powers of the presidency never again pass into the hands of this insurrectionist, sexual abusing, convicted felon. The whole list of things that are just so completely, if there were a contest for worst person in the world, over the last 10 years, clear winner. I guess there'd be competition from Putin. And going from the hope for the good, and then the dawning of the victory and power of the evil, extremely painful. I've heard from a number of friends in the weeks, maybe a couple months after the election. It's just, I'm not paying attention to the news anymore. I'm not reading the paper. I'm giving myself a news fast. It just hurts too much to, and I knew that from the inside. The amount of time I spent watching the shows on MSNBC, when you could, during that era where you could see that the forces of the rule of law were going to be holding Donald Trump accountable, indicted, all this stuff, this was going to be a slam dunk of a case, et cetera, et cetera. And then watching the unraveling. Back then, I spent a fair amount of time on MSNBC. I was really interested in getting into the ins and outs from Andrew Weissman and Neil Katyal and all these other legal beagles that could explain the ins and outs of this system that was working to hold Donald Trump accountable, moving relentlessly in that direction. Tanya Chutkan and the circuit court just completely blowing Trump's claims of immunity out of the water. But then the Supreme Court, that was already a kind of a different world. I started writing about the fascist takeover of the Supreme Court. But still, we were in the fight. It's very painful after the election, ever since the election, to look at what's happening. And part of what MSNBC has done, which I think means that they really recognize that their problem is really that people are in pain. And that is that they have begun accentuating the heroics on the pro-democracy side. So if there's a scene in the White House where the Democratic governor of Maine ends up going toe-to-toe with Donald Trump and giving back it better than she got and saying, "I'll see you in court," that we get. And Chris Murphy dressing down the evils, and Jamie Raskin, and town halls where Republicans are getting pounded by their who knows how red or blue constituents at town halls, who are unhappy with their supine relationship with a presidency that they're feeling not so good about. The more we can look at our guys fighting successfully, landing blows, and the less we dwell on the ugly stuff that is happening all the time. I mean, a week in which the President of the United States says Ukraine started the war. That's a week where we are required to give up any semblance of thinking that we remain the leader of the free world. But if the emphasis is on the fighting back and not on the ground being seized or structures being destroyed, the less painful it will be. Now, I myself still don't watch nearly as much as I did during the times when things were gratifying and not infuriating and painful. But I watch enough to be able to do my job. I read enough to be able to do my job. I basically want to make sure I know what's going on, but I don't want to dwell on it. And they get much less of me than they used to. And that's the problem that MSNBC has got. Besides emphasizing the MSNBC invested in representing an essential force for the good in America, fighting back against the rising force of fascism. They took that on. it was an honorable kind of partisanship. It was dedicated to truth, unlike, say, Fox News, which was partisan without any respect for the truth. And there's a fundamental difference between those things. But they were invested in the passions of the pro-democracy side of America that would tune in like I used to, a lot, and now I still do 5-10 minutes here and there, make sure I know. They were invested in that. And then when the bottom fell out of that, which inevitably would, with so painful a disappointment, so scary a development, so bewildering a turn in the road when half of America would choose this guy, how can they, what are they thinking, the liberals ask. And the more crazy and bewildering and frightening it is, the less people are going to want to attend to it. So the more we can start winning, more people will come back to see the battle footage. But people don't tune in to watch a movie about how our side lost. I've been in this battle for, over 20 years and maybe over 30. And my shock absorbers are shot. I don't relish looking at the ugliness. I yearn for the forces of the rule of law, of the good, of the honest, will join battle and beat this thing back into the oblivion which it deserves. This thing that has risen on the right, that is now in control, we don't want to look at it, but we got to look at it. MSNBC. It's an uphill battle to bring people back into looking at something painful. Life is hard. People don't want to take on more pain than they need. It's not that people are indifferent out there. They may not be watching MSNBC, but they got strong feelings. And they will come back when the battle turns. That's the job, of course. Thanks. I'm Andy Schmuckler. Subscribe if you would. Check out my other videos if you're interested. But above all, I invite you to see an integrated picture that I've built over the course of over 50 years of the challenge that we face as humankind on this planet for us to make it for the long haul, which we may not, and which also bears on how to understand the challenge we face as Americans in this time when fascism has been gaining in power and now threatens to defeat American democracy and the rule of law in a battle that's ongoing and whose outcome is uncertain. And I wish MSNBC well, because they've been a marvelous channel of information. Not perfect, but they've done an important job, and they've done it well. And the more we can join together in effective ways to defeat fascism, the better. But in the meantime, let's give credit to MSNBC. It's not their fault that the American people made a disastrous choice. It's not their fault that their ratings fell, because why wouldn't they fall when it's so painful to look at the things that their business is to show us? So, abetterhumanstory.org. I lay things out in a systematic way. In this medium, I like to let myself just go in a improvisational way, which I hope is interesting and effective. What it lacks in being systematic, my hope is it draws a lot of connections that might be suggestive of how integrated the whole picture might be, because things aren't just out there in pieces. There are some real patterns and some forces that can be seen, and understanding them would be helpful in our effort to create a better human future. That's my commitment. That's my promise that you will find something like that can do that on a betterhumanstory.org. And thank you for listening. Bye.